So I was looking around a coffee shop the other day, and I noticed something that probably wouldn't have struck me as odd, like maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
What was it? Well, literally every single person in that room was completely silent, just staring at a glowing rectangle. And I mean, they all looked incredibly stressed out.
Yeah, that sounds about right for nowadays.
Right. And it really got me thinking about this contradiction that just feels like the defining mystery of our time. Because if you think about it, we have more conveniences than any generation in human history.
Absolutely.
And we are technically more connected than ever before. Yet everywhere you look, people are just exhausted. They're burned out. They're anxious. It basically feels like we are collectively running on
They
fumes.
really are.
So, for today's deep dive, we are taking a massive stack of sources. We've got sociological data, time use surveys, psychological research to try and answer a pretty simple question. How did we get here? Like, how did we accidentally engineer this epidemic of white-collar burnout and youth anxiety when we were, just trying to build a more connected world?
It's a huge question.
Yeah.
And the sources point to this massive, quiet, structural collapse that happened right under our noses. Because to understand the burnout and the anxiety, we actually have to look at physical architecture.
Wait, like literal buildings?
Well, no, not literal buildings, but the social architecture of our daily lives.
Mhm.
If we trace the data back over the last few decades, we see this profound disappearance of the traditional pillars of American community. We are looking at a society that essentially just stopped gathering.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's almost like it's like society knocked down all the load-bearing walls of a house, right? Things like community centers, local clubs, bowling leagues, places of worship.
Exactly.
And now we are currently trying to hold the roof up with laptops and smartphones. But the thing is, that resulting void doesn't just stay empty, does it?
No, not at all. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human psychology. The data shows this phenomenon that sociologists are calling the Great American Introversion.
The Great American Introversion. I like that phrase.
It's super descriptive. Because if you pull the numbers from the American Time Use Survey, the decline in face-to-face socializing is just staggering. Over the last 2 decades, for American men, in-person socializing has dropped by 30%.
A 30% drop. I mean, just think about your own calendar for a second if you're listening to this. How many hours a week are you actually sitting in a room, physically hanging out with a friend, where the explicit purpose is just to be together?
Yeah, it's probably a lot less than you think.
Way less. And what's wild is that as we withdraw from human contact, the sources show we are replacing it in some incredibly unexpected ways. There is this bizarre statistic that really stood out to me.
So the pet one.
Yes. The average female pet owner now spends more time actively engaged with her cat or dog than hanging out face-to-face with fellow humans on any given day.
I mean, it sounds funny, but the psychology behind that pet statistic is quite telling.
How so?
Because engaging with an animal is safe. It is completely predictable. A dog isn't going to, challenge your political views.
Right.
And a cat isn't going to cancel plans on you at the last minute.
Not
Human interaction, on the other hand, involves friction.
friction. Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
requires effort, vulnerability, and the risk of awkwardness. And we are collectively choosing to avoid that friction. We see this vividly in what researchers call the church-going bust. Over the past 25 years, an estimated 40 million Americans stopped going to church.
40 million. That is a massive demographic shift. But looking at our research, the implication here isn't really about theology, right? Or what people believe in their hearts.
No, exactly.
It's about the physical building. It's about the loss of what sociologists call the third place.
Right, the places that aren't home, which is your first place, and aren't work, which is the second place.
Got it.
The third place used to be the local library, the school gym, the union hall, the neighborhood diner. These spaces acted as the retaining walls against hyper-individualism.
Because they brought people together.
Yes. Traditional community rituals provided something very specific for our social fitness. They were embodied, meaning you physically had to put on shoes and go there. They were synchronous, so they happened at a specific time. And they were deep and collective.
Deep and collective.
Right, they forced you to interact with people across different generations and backgrounds, which builds a shared sense of reality.
I have to say, I'm struggling with this a bit, though.
Why is that?
Because if I look at my phone right now, I have, 5 different group chats going. I'm texting dozens of people, sharing memes, coordinating weekend plans. My phone is constantly buzzing. It really doesn't feel isolated. In
That's
fact,
right.
it feels overwhelmingly social sometimes. So aren't we just socializing more efficiently now without needing to, actually go down to the bowling alley?
Well, the data suggests that is the grand illusion of the digital age. You might feel like you are socializing more efficiently, but you are stripping away the very friction that makes human connection actually stick to your ribs.
Stick to your ribs. I like that.
Think about the nature of a text message. It is disembodied and asynchronous. You aren't reading body language. You aren't synchronizing your emotions with someone else in real time.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right. If you tell a joke in a room, you hear the laughter immediately. If you text a joke, you get a digital icon of a laughing face hours later. When we lose the physical friction of gathering, we lose the social fitness that keeps us resilient against stress.
Which brings us back to that void. The physical spaces disappeared, but our deeply human need for meaning, connection, and transcendence, that didn't just go away.
No, it didn't.
So what did adults do? They redirected all of that reverence and energy straight into the office.
Exactly. And the evolution of labor over the last century perfectly illustrates this shift. We can track a really clear progression here. 100 years ago, people had jobs.
Just jobs.
Just jobs. A job was about necessity and basic survival. Then, in the mid-20th century, we developed the concept of careers.
Right. Climbing the ladder.
Exactly. A career was about status, stability, corporate loyalty. But now, especially among highly educated professionals, we've moved into the era of the calling.
The calling. There is this huge expectation that your work shouldn't just pay the bills, it should provide ultimate spiritual and emotional meaning.
Yes. The sources refer to this cultural shift as workism. It is the elite belief that work is the centerpiece of one's identity.
Workism.
And it created a bizarre historical anomaly starting in the late 20th century, because historically, the entire point of accumulating wealth was to buy leisure.
Right. The rich lords and aristocrats always worked way less than the poor peasants.
Exactly. But if you look at the data from 1980 to 2005, something completely unprecedented happened.
Yeah.
The richest 10% of married men in America actually increased their work hours by 250 hours a year.
250 hours more. They became wealthy, and they used that wealth to buy more work. They basically turned the desk into the modern altar.
They really did.
And you can see why this happened. The 80s saw this massive shift toward a knowledge economy. When your work is entirely in your head and on a laptop, it never really turns off. Busyness became a literal status symbol.
And corporate culture shifted to reward that constant availability. But tethering your deepest sense of self to your economic output is highly destructive.
Why is it so destructive, though?
Because to make work the absolute centerpiece of your life is to place your self-esteem in the mercurial hands of the market. And the market doesn't care about your soul. It cares about quarterly earnings.
Wow.
When you worship a god with firing power, you become incredibly fragile.
I have to admit this is really tough to swallow because it goes against literally everything millennial and Gen Z professionals were raised to believe.
Oh, for sure.
My whole life, I've been told, do what you love. We hear these commencement speeches telling us to find our passion and we'll never work a day in our life.
We all heard that.
So if I am genuinely passionate about my career, shouldn't that protect me from burnout? Isn't finding meaning in your job a fundamentally good thing?
Well, finding meaning is wonderful. But expecting an employer to provide the spiritual fulfillment that used to come from your family, your neighborhood, and your community, that is a recipe for despair.
Okay, that makes sense.
The philosopher David Brooks makes a brilliant distinction here between resume virtues and eulogy virtues.
Oh, I've heard about this. Resume virtues are the skills you bring to the marketplace, right? Like ambition, efficiency, coding, marketing.
Exactly. And eulogy virtues are the things people actually talk about at your funeral. Whether you were kind, whether you were a loyal friend, whether you were honest. Workism forces us to sacrifice our eulogy virtues on the altar of productivity.
And that perfectly explains the wave of viral workplace trends we've seen recently. Things like quiet quitting and the Great Resignation.
Yes, exactly.
Because for a while, the media was painting these trends as signs of a lazy generation that just, didn't want to work anymore. But reading through these psychological reports, quiet quitting has nothing to do with laziness.
Nothing at all. It is a symptom of profound white-collar burnout. It is the exhaustion of an entire generation realizing that the corporate temple is empty.
Yeah.
They gave their weekends, their evenings, and their emotional bandwidth to a company, expecting a sense of profound community in return. And what they got was a layoff notice in a corporate email.
So while adults were desperately seeking community and transcendence in the labor market, what happened to the kids?
That's the other half of the tragedy.
Right. Deprived of physical hangouts, with the local youth centers closed and their parents working 60-hour weeks, young people were just left to navigate their own void. And they turned to the digital market. They substituted embodied reality with screens.
And the environment they entered was fundamentally hostile to human psychological development. We frequently hear social media compared to junk food, right?
All the time, empty calories.
Exactly. But the sociological data suggests a much darker and frankly more accurate metaphor.
Mm.
We should be looking at social media not as candy, but as attention alcohol.
Attention alcohol, let's really look at that term because it completely changes how you view a smartphone.
It really does.
It's not just empty calories. It acts as a social lubricant that offers this intoxicating cocktail of dopamine, disorientation, and dependency.
Precisely. Just like alcohol, the internet can be fun and relatively harmless in small, regulated doses for fully developed adults.
Sure.
But for a teenager whose brain is exquisitely sensitive to peer judgment and social status, handing them unfiltered access to social media is like handing them a bottle of tequila. It's highly combustible.
Why?
And the leaked internal studies from Instagram explicitly acknowledge this dynamic. The company's own research found that 32% of teen girls who felt bad about their bodies felt worse after using the app.
And the really tragic part of that study is that even though they felt worse, they reported feeling completely unable to stop using it.
Exactly.
Kidding.
It's a dependency.
There's another piece of research in our stack showing that 31% of all social media use is driven by self-control problems.
Yes.
Just think about what that means. 1 in every 3 minutes you spend on these apps is time you didn't plan to spend and time you actively regret spending afterward.
Because the architecture of the internet is the diabolical opposite of community ritual. We established earlier that traditional community is embodied, synchronous, deep, and collective.
Right.
The internet is disembodied, asynchronous, shallow, and solitary. When you trap developing minds in a solitary, shallow environment that is powered by algorithmic outrage, you generate a phenomenon known as prevalence inflation.
I really want to spend some time on this concept of prevalence inflation because it explains so much of what we see online today.
It's crucial.
Imagine you're a teenager scrolling TikTok. You have a huge math test coming up, and you're nervous. That's normal.
Completely normal.
But your feed is an endless stream of viral anxiety content, just thousands of videos diagnosing symptoms and unpacking trauma. I mean, the hashtag trauma alone has billions of views.
Billions.
Because young people are marinating in this intense clinical content all day, they start to process normal, everyday, daily stress through the lens of severe pathology.
They interpret a difficult math test or, a minor disagreement in a group chat, not as a normal hurdle of growing up, but as a trauma response or anxiety disorder. They adopt a fixed identity around their distress.
But, I mean, I'm looking at how much more vocabulary we have to talk about our feelings now compared to 50 years ago. Kids today are so fluent in therapy speak.
They really are.
They talk about boundaries, gaslighting, toxic behaviors, triggers, surely destigmatizing mental health and giving people the tools to articulate their emotions is a step in the right direction, right?
Destigmatizing mental illness is absolutely crucial. But the tragic irony is that modern internet culture adopts the vocabulary of therapy while simultaneously burning down the actual lessons of therapy.
How do you mean?
Well, to understand this, look at clinical cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's the gold standard for treating anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
The core lesson of CBT is to teach a patient not to catastrophize.
Right.
It teaches you to cool the fire of your anger, to reframe negative thoughts, and to build resilience by facing your fears in the physical world.
But the internet algorithm does the exact opposite.
Exactly.
The algorithm actively rewards and monetizes outrage and catastrophe. If you post a calm, measured take about a bad day, nobody clicks.
Nope.
But if you post a highly emotional, catastrophic video about how your friend is deeply toxic and your entire life is ruined, it goes viral. Intense negative emotions are basically the most aerodynamic things on the web.
And so we have built an online ecosystem that thrives on the very psychological traps that therapists implore their patients to reject. It encourages rumination. It encourages avoiding the physical world.
Right, keeps you trapped.
So you have a generation adopting this fixed identity like, I am my trauma, which causes them to pull back from physical interactions. But withdrawing from the physical world removes the very social friction that would actually cure their anxiety.
Which brings us to the ultimate heartbreaking consequence of all this. We tried to cure our modern isolation with constant digital connectivity for the youth and relentless productivity for the adults.
Yeah.
We engineered these massive systemic cures, but they act like a
The
disease.
data on youth distress is a sobering wake-up call that we really just can't ignore.
Mm.
Looking at the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, teen girls and LGBTQ teens in particular are engulfed in historic, unprecedented rates of sadness and hopelessness.
It's awful.
And it is vital to look at this data impartially, because currently the political culture war surrounding identity is tragically masking a dire public health crisis. Commentators on both the left and the right are utterly convinced that the way their political opponents talk about identity is the root cause of this distress.
They are so busy blaming each other's political rhetoric, while the kids are actually just caught in the crossfire of a massive technological and structural collapse.
Exactly.
And the data backs this up with a bizarre geographic anomaly that really jumped out of the research. They call it Anglosphere despair.
Yes. If the problem was purely the existence of the smartphone, you would expect youth anxiety to be rising uniformly across the entire globe, because smartphones are everywhere.
Right, everyone has them.
But the World Happiness Report revealed a completely different pattern. Youth happiness is actually rising in places like Eastern Europe and East Asia. The plummeting youth happiness is heavily concentrated in English-speaking countries.
The US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
Precisely.
It's like we're exporting our own highly individualistic, neurotic, psychological distress as a cultural product. Right alongside Hollywood blockbusters and pop music, we are broadcasting this anxious therapy speak style of self-regard across the English-speaking web.
We are transmitting a culture of diagnostic inflation peer-to-peer. The hyper-individualism of the Anglosphere creates a perfect storm. And honestly, we can't let parents off the hook here either.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's not just the digital environment failing the next generation. The physical environment shaped by adult workism is actively contributing. American parents are passing the profound anxiety of the modern workplace directly to their children.
You see this in the survey data about what parents prioritize. When parents are asked what they hope for their kids' futures, they overwhelmingly name financial security and career success as their top priorities.
Yes.
They place career success far, far above getting married, having children, or even basic moral virtues like being honest or accepting of others.
It's very revealing.
We are explicitly telling our kids, hey, your career and your resume are at the top of the pyramid. And your character, your family, your community, those are just optional secondary features.
And when we pull back and synthesize all of this data, the collapse of the third place, the rise of workism as a religion, the attention alcohol of social media, and the despair of the Anglosphere, the full scope of the tragic irony becomes clear.
Yeah.
By abandoning our physical social fitness in favor of glowing screens and relentless careerism, we have engineered a society that is incredibly productive, constantly communicating, but entirely alone.
We took a sledgehammer to the retaining walls of our communities. We stopped going to the spaces where we just showed up for each other with no agenda other than to exist in the same room.
Right.
We substituted those messy, beautiful human interactions with the exhausting deities of the office and the screen. And the result is that adults are burned out, kids are anxious, and everyone is lonely.
But recognizing this dynamic and naming it is the necessary first step toward escaping it. You cannot fix a structural problem until you see the
Which is exactly why we wanted to take this deep dive today. And why does all of this sociological data matter to you listening right now? Because looking at your own life and recognizing whether you are sacrificing your eulogy virtues for resume virtues, or whether you are treating your smartphone like attention alcohol is the only way to reclaim your own social fitness.
Beautifully said.
You have to recognize the water you are swimming in. Community isn't some magical, abstract concept that happens to other people. Community is simply the place where people keep showing up.
It really is that simple.
And to wrap this up, I want to leave you with a historical perspective to chew on that builds on everything we've unpacked today. Back in 1930, the great economist John Maynard Keynes made a famous prediction.
Oh, this is a great point.
He looked at the trajectory of technology and predicted that by the 21st century, technological progress would be so advanced that we would only need to work a 15-hour work week. He genuinely believed that our biggest societal challenge would be figuring out what to do with our massive abundance of leisure time.
Imagine that.
Right. Well, here we are. We have the advanced technology he dreamed of. But we never got the free time. We didn't get it because we just filled the void with more work, more emails, and endless scrolling. It makes you wonder, What if the real reason we never achieved that 15-hour work week isn't because the economy failed us? What if it's because we became entirely too terrified of what we'd have to face in our own free time without a screen or a spreadsheet to distract us from ourselves? Rebuilding those load-bearing walls of community might require us to do the hardest thing imaginable in the modern world, getting comfortable sitting in the quiet together.